Hello and welcome to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. I'm Sarah Pittendrigh, a mum, award-winning entrepreneur, cancer survivor, mentor and coach. In series 2 of the podcast, we're sharing new stories along with the ethos that you're never too old and it's never too late to design a life you love. Today, I'm joined by fabulous Jo Feeley, future expert and chief executive of TrendBible, who forecasts the future of life and home. Across her career as a trend forecaster spanning more than 20 years, Jo has advised retailers, brands, charities, investors, and governments all over the world. Her insights have been featured in publications including The Independent, Financial Times, and Radio 4. The purpose of Jo's work is to help companies make meaningful change by using trends for good. She has won multiple awards, including recently Creative Entrepreneur of the Year at the prestigious Great British Entrepreneur Awards. I'm looking forward to hearing more about Jo's work and the ethos in this podcast. Before we do, please can I ask you to rate and subscribe to the Formidable Over 40 podcast so I can keep sharing more inspirational stories. So good morning, Jo.
Good morning.
So I've given a little bit of an intro there to our listeners about you, but it would be absolutely wonderful if you would share a little bit about yourself and your business with them.
I certainly will. I live in Newcastle with my husband and my two boys, my two sons and our dog. I'm one of 4 girls, so I've got 3 sisters. And I'm a founder and chief exec of TrendBible, which is what takes up most of my time, where we forecast future trends for retailers and brands and help them predict what's going to happen, how people are going to think and feel and what they're going to do in the future up to 5 years ahead. So it chimes really well with my sort of personal traits. I'm an ideas person, as you are, Sarah. I know that. So I have ideas all the time, and being a trend forecaster is the perfect career for me because I'm constantly thinking, well, why did that happen? And why is this happening? And what does this chain of events lead to? And where, I'm always kind of pulling the thread of curiosity on things. I do that very naturally. And that's what trend forecasters actually do. I can always spot a good trend forecaster at 50 paces because they are ideas people and they're really curious. And so because of that, my brain's permanently switched on to things. And so the rest of my time I spend trying to, let's just say, I would say sort of active meditation. So I do things that get me a little bit of time back for myself. I love spending time on my own when I can. I think because I'm so busy in my household and in my work life. So I like to go to the gym. I love sort of fitness stuff. I like to get out on my bike. I love Reiki. I love doing Pilates, like anything really that is kind of relaxing and mindful, but can sort of help me get away from all of these permanent ideas that seem to occur to me.
And I think in the sort of role that you're doing, you're a CEO of a very busy and very creative agency in industry, and I think that time, isn't it? It's so important. For in the olden days, I go because I'm old and ancient. I can remember that the sort of the measurement was how early you got into your office and were sat in the desk. It was like this sort of elbows at the door of who could get in first. And then it was sort of looking around the room to see who was actually going to dare to go home. And there was just no space for the growth thinking, and I think what you're saying there about all of these wonderful things you do, such as your Reiki, your Pilates, and that quality time that you're spending on your own. I think you're the trend forecaster, but I feel like the tide's changing. Do you feel like that, Jo? Do you see that?
I do, and I'm pleased to see it. I mean, there's still, if you believe what you read on sort of LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that, there's still plenty of evidence to suggest that lots of employers want people to go back full time to the office and to work a 5-day week, 9 till 5. But actually, I think I run my business completely differently to that. And I've always afforded myself, well, as much as possible, certainly in the last sort of 7 or 8 years of running my business, I've always afforded myself the luxury of what I set the business up for in the first place, which is time, to give myself the time to do the stuff that I want to do. And I fight for that really hard because you do have to say, no to a lot of things, even things you would actually quite like to do, but that when they roll around, there's too much to do. So I think probably the time of founders carving out that time for themselves is now. But I'd like to think that as founders, particularly female founders, that we then afford that luxury to the staff that work for us as well, who also crave that kind of flexibility. So I do think we're in a sort of a tide of change on that. And I think there's a really big difference, if I'm honest, between the way a lot of male-focused chief executives run their businesses and female-focused ones do, because a lot of women particularly women who are mothers, can really feel the burden of motherhood and family life alongside workload. And it's a lot when you're working 5 days a week and you're trying to squeeze all of your family time and all of your responsibilities into the time that fits around that. So I'm a real big fan of the idea that work is like the foundation for a better life. And I think that phrase should be as expansive as you can possibly make it. It should be a better life in terms of it takes you somewhere either academically or inspirationally that you wouldn't go without that job or that role, but it also can take you it allows you to do stuff that you want to do in your life that might be outside of what you've trained to do as a job.
Because otherwise, what's it all about?
Exactly.
What is it all about?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, this is the thing that, you know, I see it quite a bit through my mentoring, you know, and you know, I'm a big believer in the tail should not be wagging the dog. Otherwise, what was it all about? And I think that can be lost, can't it? It can be lost in and I do understand. You know, I've founded a number of businesses myself, and I understand that, you know, at that startup stage, there's a lot of juggling going on. And with all the best will in the world, you know, we've got the other extreme, haven't we, on social media, where we've got people telling us you can build a 7-figure business while you're sat on a beach drinking cocktails in Bali. But, you know, which, hey, fantastic if you can get it. And I always say, if you've done it, please get in touch with me, because I want to interview you. I want to interview you because my listeners want to know what this magic is that you've got, because you need to share it, you know. But so I think there is that point, isn't there, where you do have the juggle. You know, as a mum, you're juggling home, you're juggling your kids, you're trying to build your business, you're putting your kids to bed, and then you're trying to work while they're asleep, and you're trying to do stuff before they get up. So I know you do have that, don't you? So how do you you know, how did you sort of find that there was that sweet spot? When did you find that sweet spot in your business where I mean, you've managed to sort of carve that time for yourself?
I think you have to be vigilant about it. And I've spoken to you about this before. There's times when you kind of you forget how to do it, or you think you kind of get caught up in, I'm just having a busy week, so I'm just going to put my all into it. I'm going to have to work some late nights, and I'm just doing emails late one night. And then before you know it, it's 2 nights, you're up till midnight. And then, you know, halfway through the week, you're really exhausted, but you're just going to plow on. So I think there's kind of no such thing as cracked it. With lots of these things, actually, with any, you know, we all have our weaknesses. We all have our sort of areas where we're likely to fall into those traps. I mean, mine is I don't say no to nearly enough things. And last year I set myself a little system up, because I work really well if I create a system. And I said I was going to say no to 6 things a month. And God, it was so difficult, because I get asked to do things that I would love to do, go and speak to school children or help, you know, emerging entrepreneurs, stuff that I can see the value in, but that isn't going to deliver back to my business in any significant way if I do too much of it. So I have to put barriers in place for that. And last year, every month I would say, right, you know, I've got to say no to 6 things, and it would be excruciating, but I did it. And so this year I thought, I don't need to have that routine anymore, because I've learned how to say no. And lo and behold, you know, I've had probably 3 weeks at the start of this year where I signed up to stuff that, you know, it was my weakness is people will ask me to do things months or years in advance. And because my calendar looks clear, I'll just say yes, because there's no reason not to say yes from a calendar perspective. But actually, by the time that rolls around, there are other things I need to be doing. So it's having respect for the future me, ironically enough, when I'm a trend forecaster, but having respect for the future me that's going to will have a busy schedule that week. So those are the kinds of techniques I put in place, because I think you have to be vigilant. I think you can learn things about yourself and then unlearn them quite quickly. It takes quite a bit of practice to get new behaviors alive in your business. And it's the same with overworking and overcommitting to work. It can be very tempting. You know, I had a member of staff off last week, and I said, oh, I'll just, you know, I've got those skills as a trend forecaster. I'll just jump in and help. And on day 3 or 4, and I was enjoying it, it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying getting back sort of on the tools and into the work, but that's not really, somebody isn't running the business if I'm meddling in the trend forecasting. So it's just being vigilant, holding yourself accountable to things, recognizing when you're going off path. I think in the last 3 weeks, I've managed 2 days a week in work fully, because even working from home with little ones is extremely difficult to get a full day's work in. So that I'm aware that is, it sort of tips me out of balance, but I'm a lot kinder to myself when that happens now. I think previously I would have thought, I need to get caught up. There's things I didn't do last week, I've got to do this week. And actually what I say to myself now is what was important is that I'm being the kind of mum I want to be, and I'm not bundling my kids off in a dangerous situation and sending them to school when they're struggling. I'm being first and foremost the mum that I want to be, and I can go on and be the chief exec, the founder I want to be another day. It's not so pressing. So I'm probably a lot kinder to myself than I used to be. And I think that's sometimes where that desire to overwork comes from, is just the pressure. And lots of CEOs and founders are like that. It's kind of what's helped us get where we are, is that ability to kind of thrive under intense pressure. But you can't do that long term. It does have consequences, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It really does. And it's about learning to be present in that present, isn't it? So when you're being the mum, it's about being the present mum. And when you're being the CEO, being the present CEO. And, and that takes time to mold, really, doesn't it? And time to let go of the guilt, because guilt, it's a guilt thing as well. I don't know if you found that, but as a mum and a founder, and it would be like, guilt of not being at home as a mum, and then guilt at not being present in the business. And I think it gets to a point where you just have to, you kind of just have to set those boundaries to be good at everything, and or to do it as well as you can. It's to allow yourself to let go, so that when you're in mum mode, you're being the present mum. And when you're in CEO mode, being the present CEO, and knowing that by just being present in those moments, not everything is going to fall around your ears, because you've got to have confidence in yourself that you've actually put those structures in place to ensure that it doesn't.
2 segments of the overall pie as well, aren't they? I mentioned before about, I love Pilates. I try and do that twice a week, and Reiki, and, going to the gym. Those are things that I like to be able to do, that is time for me. But they're the first things that fall out. They're the first things, anything that you are doing for yourself, because family life and the business are the 2 main priorities. And so that is why I'm so strict about making sure that in any given week, I've got those things sort of scheduled in, so that I know that I'm going to have a little bit of time back, just for the space for the mental clarity, I think, as well, and just to sort of wind down from it. So it's not easy.
It's not easy, but recharging your batteries means, and this is what I think people forget, and it's the importance of remembering that you are a someone, not just a someone's. Because by focusing on being the someone and doing these valuable things that you're doing for yourself, they are the really important things, because they're the things that are actually charging your battery, aren't they? And by doing that, you're then in that position to be the best you can be in all those other roles that you have to perform in your life.
I think there's definitely times in my life where I've thought, well, I just need to be independent and crack on and handle these things and do it all on my own. And actually, the most powerful thing you can do in those situations is ask for help. And I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at asking for help. I have to really be at rock bottom to kind of go, can someone help me, either with the kids or with work stuff? So I think that sort of vulnerability is good for everybody to see, to know that you don't just easily shoulder the burden. It does have a pressure on you. And I think even just, making sure, I'm constantly thinking about how female founders balance this, family life, especially if they're mothers, with work life. And it does come down to, having a partner that can contribute significantly at home to allow you to do what you need to do. And those are difficult conversations still. Even here we are in 2023, people still struggling to sort of have those conversations and understand what 50-50 actually looks like. So I was never good at having those conversations and asking for that support and help, and I'm much better at it now, because that's what it takes. That is, you need to be able to step away from some of those commitments at times and share the burden and responsibility, if you can, with other family members.
I think I also look at it. It could be a bit of a double-edged sword going on here, because there's a one side of it where it's freedom. And it's very interesting working with a number of my founders and CEOs of why they feel they need to be free. So there's often been a motivation which runs quite deep as to why they've felt they needed financial freedom, why it was so important to them. But that would be a book and a story for another day, But there's also another a layer maybe, which is about our natural instinct as women to be nurturers and to take responsibility. Whereas if, I don't know, you can't speak generally, but many maybe feel that their job is to nurture and make sure everything's okay, and to be the one who's responsible for everything being right, and therefore they take on so much and so much to the point that they get to where they say, that's it.
Yeah, it probably doesn't come from a terrible place. I think it comes from a place of love and wanting to do the best for people. But sometimes you can't do everything you think you might. You can't remove all of the fear in the world or the insecurity in the world for your loved ones. Like, you have to let them go out there and feel those things for themselves, as we all would have done and are doing. Yeah. So there's definitely you're right. I think, and I do sort of also think that we are socially conditioned to think that women are more nurturing than men, but actually there's no sort of biological evidence to suggest that they are, I don't think. I think we're socially conditioned to think that is a woman's role inside of a family. But again, I think that's starting to change. I see some amazing examples of fathers, both inside my business and the entrepreneurs that I meet, amazing examples of fathers that are really nurturing. And I think I'd like to think that, by the time my kids are old enough and in their 20s, that they're not questioning whether they're as nurturing as a mother could be, because I do think it's probably something we're told and have seen in previous generations and have learned, but it's probably not strictly true.
No, I totally agree with you 100%. So I want to ask you about Formidable Over 40. So I created this podcast because there's two sides to why I've created this podcast. So one is that I want midlife women to feel free to speak up, and share their fascinating stories and their vulnerabilities, and feel that they've got such a wealth of knowledge to share through the decades, the layer upon layer upon layer through the decades that's been hunted and gathered to share with others who may be feeling stuck. And we're living in a world where often through social media, life's portrayed as perfect. And therefore, people can often feel inadequate, insecure, they're not enough, and often as well, they can look at people's near to destination, look at midlife women who are running businesses, getting ready to exit, and it can look all very nice and safe and secure and wonderful. But they haven't actually seen the journey. And I think it's the journey getting to that destination that's really important. And I want to share it to show that it is absolutely fine to have bumps in the road. And I think more so, not just for the midlifers, but for the next generation coming on, who have been brought up around this social media, which is very high on everything's perfect, and if you're not perfect, you're not enough. And we know that that's just not true. So that is a lot of the ethos behind Formidable Over 40. What would you say Formidable Over 40 means to you?
Well, all of that, I think. I'm 47 and I've loved my 40s. I think there's real value in being in your 40s. And I speak to friends who are in their 50s and they say it's even better, So I think there's something about the way that midlife is framed up. Quite recently, actually, in the last 2 to 3 years, I think there's been a real shift in the visibility of women over 40. And, there was an increase in the amount of women who've stopped dyeing their hair and are going grey naturally. And, there's a kind of new movement for women over 40 to naturally be whatever over 40 means. And I think it does mean an increase in confidence and a sureness and a certainty about who you are and what you are, and an embracing of the flaws that you've still got. Of course, life isn't perfect when you're over 40. So I think it's an exciting time for younger women to look at women in their 40s, 50s and beyond and see some really strong, visible examples of what life can look like. Because I don't remember, I mean, when I was sort of in my early 20s, it was all about youth culture. And, you know, my role as a trend forecaster, I worked in fashion before I set up my own agency. And it was always about, you know, make sure that we're in Ibiza, where at the time it was full of young clubbers, and we had to go and see what they were wearing and sort of forecast trends based on what young teenagers were doing, even if it was to inform clothing for older women. So, you know, there was always this focus on youth being this kind of golden era that everybody else aspired to and subscribed to. And I've really seen that change. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. I still think there are, you know, there's not a significant enough portion of brands or companies that understand older women and see what they need and want. But we're getting there. You know, even up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't even see a woman in a car advert unless she was a passenger. You know, she was there to be the eye candy. She wasn't there because she had the spending power to buy that car. And we're only just, I mean, there's only really a handful of ads that are like that still now, that demonstrate and show us this example of what women can be. So we all consume a certain type of social media online, and so maybe the stuff that I'm consuming allows me, maybe I've sort of filtered out all of the noise, but what I choose to see and what I can definitely see is a selection of women 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus and beyond that really inspire me and make me realize it's a good time to be over 40. I think it's the best time.
Yeah, and I think the brands have got to waken up, because we are the super spenders. You know, it's proven. Forbes did a piece on us being the super consumers, you know, and I'm sure there's a stat out there, and I'll have to double check it, but I do believe that the midlifers outspend the younger generation by 250%. And I think it's you know, and as I say, it's a gap that they're really missing out on. You know, we're powerful spenders. I know that from myself. I've just been interviewing a wonderful lady called Sheridan Stewart, who's written a great book. I've actually got it here. And it is proof. I have enough, I do enough, and I am enough. And what Sheridan's saying, it's about how much we're spending, and we need to slow it down. So these brands these brands need to jump on the bandwagon pretty quickly, because we're being told to trim down with our spending. We're going that crazy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's not just about spending. It's about ethics. It's about morals. It's about values. It's, you know, there's so much more than just capture the expenditure, capture the pound, the midlife pound. That's not. It can't just be about that. And I think if brands do that, then they're going to get it wrong. If they think it's just about taking money off women that have got money, I think they have to get it right in terms of the ethics, the morals, the struggles, the pain points that women over 40 still have, and really fully understanding that. We know lots of organisations, not just brands and retailers, but lots of organisations still get that completely wrong, don't they? So there's still a long way to go, but I'm optimistic for sure.
Yeah, it's going to swing round. So going back to when you were, say, 15, what was Joanna's dreams, and what were her hobbies? What were you doing?
Oh, wow. Well, when I was 15, so I was 15 in 1990, which I just think back to it now. I mean, teenage years are really hard. My son's 14 now, so I was kind of thinking about, you know, he's just coming into this sort of age that I'm thinking back to now. I was really strong-willed. I was quite a quiet teenager. I'd been a very sort of shy and quiet child, but very sort of strong-willed, very determined. I always knew really what I wanted to do. And so I probably was, the oldest of 4 girls, probably setting a terrible example for 3 younger siblings. It must have been awful for my parents. But what I loved and what I remember most from that time is my sort of, you know, I lived in a small rural village in Northumberland, but my sort of culture picture was so much bigger than that. And I always, I loved to watch. I remember being 15, I think I ordered my first university prospectus when I was 15, and it was for a university in California. And it just arrived in the post. My parents were thinking, what is going on? You know, where have you got that from? I mean, I probably just watched a little bit too much Beverly Hills 90210 or something like that, but yeah, I loved like the clothes show. I used to watch these TV shows and just soak up and absorb culture, music. I always had a part-time job from my 14th birthday, but I used to save up for hair dye and I'd save for like 2 or 3 weeks for a t-shirt from Topshop, secondhand Levi's. Like, it was just, I didn't know that I was going to end up being a fashion designer. I didn't know that I could be a fashion designer. I probably didn't even realize it was a real job. But I just had a life filled with, I just could see all these sparkly, exciting things. And it was the time of the supermodels. So it was all about, Naomi and Christy and Linda Evangelista and all that kind of stuff. I used to save up for magazines and cut them all out and stick their pictures together in collages. And really, when I look back now, that was the start point of me really starting to get under the skin of the fashion industry. And it took a while after that for someone to say to me, do you realize that fashion design is a legitimate career and it can be done? And that didn't happen really till I was studying my A-levels, when I picked art and graphic design. That a brilliant teacher who was only with us for a few weeks, but she said to me, why don't you tailor one of your projects around fashion? That was really where it all sort of ignited for me, all of this sort of cultural excitement. It just really, I just loved all of it. I knew there was something around culture and the way that people behaved. And, my job now as a trend forecaster is about social science and tribes and groups of people, and what makes somebody change their mind one day and wear a colour they've never worn before, or decorate their home in a particular way, or or buy a drink they've never bought before, or change their laundry powder. All of those are the decisions that are made, not just because you walk into a store or click on an ad online and just change the way that you behave. There are all sorts of interesting little pathways through, and influences. Our taste and our values and our attitudes are all shaped in really particular ways. And that's my job as a trend forecaster, is to braille all of that information and start to formulate a picture of what that future is going to look like. But I can see the glimmers of it now. If I look back at me, age 15, buying my hair dye and saving up for weeks on end for magazines to cut up. That's what that was. It was this wanting to understand what modern culture actually was.
That was a seed that was planted.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was in a village in Northumberland. Wild ambitions.
In a little village in Northumberland, and look where it's taken you. I mean, it's been absolutely fascinating, Jo, and it's been absolutely wonderful from someone who's known you for quite a while to stand back and actually watch how you've evolved as a CEO and how your business has evolved. I mean, you're an absolute inspiration, and it was even more wonderful, which we'll come to later on, to watch you receive that award in London back in December. There, it was very, very much deserved. So tell the listeners who don't know, what was the journey of to get to founding TrendBible? So where were you, and how did you come to found this fantastic business that you've got today?
So when I did go to university and study fashion design, against the advice of, I hope you wouldn't mind me saying, but against the advice of my dad, who thought I was completely nuts, and asked me, how many fashion designers do you know that come from here? And I said, none. And it was true. So I did, I got on a course at Kingston University in Surrey. At the time, I think it still is in the top 3 fashion schools in the country. So I wanted to go somewhere really good, and I got in somewhere really good. And I had 3 years there where, it was really hard. I didn't enjoy it much, actually, if I'm honest. I didn't enjoy university much at all, but I learned a lot. It was very hard work. We didn't have one of those courses where you could kind of float into a lecture and disappear off for the afternoon. We were in 9 till 5 every single day. We were taught every single day for every hour. And the idea was that, they had something like a 98% success rate of people that got placed in jobs after they graduated. So there were high expectations, but it was a good grounding and a good training for going into the fashion industry, which is notoriously competitive. So I studied fashion design. I realized in my second year that I wasn't the most I was never going to stand out, as my women's wear design looked like a few other people in my class. If push came to shove, was I really going to get a job? Because I was going to be up against these sort of 4 or 5 same people that had work that looked pretty similar to mine, and theirs probably was a little bit better. So I switched. It was very sort of strategic and switched to menswear because there were only 2 people studying menswear in my year. So I thought, well, there's probably going to be more than 3 menswear jobs out there. Switched to menswear. And that was actually a really good thing to do because I did get a job in menswear. When I got to my final year at university in the Easter holidays, a friend of mine and I decided to spend our grant money in the days when you used to get a grant from the government. We spent our grant money on flights to New York. And so we got on a plane and went out there and met with a recruitment agent out there who put us in front of an employer. I think the second day we were there, and we both got jobs. So we both got design assistant jobs with visas. So we just had to come back and complete our degrees, and they paid for us to go back out to the States, which those kind of things just don't happen anymore. We're living in different sort of political times now. So it was just a window where that was a possibility. So my first job was actually as a fashion designer, men's fashion designer in New York City, which, I'd only been there once on this trip to get the job. I'd never been there before. I'd never been to America before. I think it was only the 3rd flight I'd ever taken in my life. So I wasn't very worldly wide. I think there's still the little sort of person from the village was still very much alive and kicking in me, rather than someone who was prepared to go and live on their own in New York City. But I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Lived in a women's hostel, women's working hostel with I think about 200 or 300 other women from all over the world. It was just the best time. Lots of fun, lots of hard work as well. But I had learned about the world of trend forecasting whilst I was at university. But I'd been told there were about 200 jobs worldwide. So, and that they're not going to give one of those jobs to a graduate. So I was told to, go and learn your craft, go and be a designer, and keep your eyes peeled for these opportunities that might come up. And it was years later, really, that eventually a job was advertised as a trend forecaster back in London. And it was a bit above my pay grade and my experience level, but I went for it anyway because it was so rare, and I got the job and spent I think about 3 years being a trend forecaster there for the menswear industry, and traveled the world. We had clients in South Africa and Poland and the States. I was in New York 4 times a year, in South Africa 3 or 4 times a year. Really saw the world. It was heavy going. It was a lot of travel, but I really loved it. I knew that I'd found part of my creativity, my curiosity that I mentioned at the start, just really dovetailed into being a trend forecaster. It was a little bit of a science. It was a little bit of an art. It was creative. It really sort of fit really well. And so when I left that agency in London and decided to move back to the Northeast, I really had wanted to move back to the Northeast for a while, actually. I don't really know why, other than home was calling. I wanted to come back. So I moved back, and again, against probably the advice of a lot of my peers in London, who said, if you're going to be a trend forecaster, you need to be in New York or Amsterdam, Paris or London, not Newcastle. It was pre-Teams calls, you couldn't kind of do any sort of remote work then. So it was not really, I knew that it was quite risky, but it did pay off. I had to travel quite a lot to start off with. And it was really hard. I spent, I think, the first 8 months with no income at all, no work at all. I was pitching all the time, and nobody was saying yes. And I didn't really know why. It took me a long time to understand the difference between being a good practitioner, a good technician of your role, and selling and marketing, which are 2 very different things. So that was kind of my journey into the world of trend forecasting. And I eventually set up TrendBible really just with the aim of working independently. I wanted to work in my spare bedroom and listen to the radio all day long. And I just couldn't bear to walk away from some of the opportunities. Once the work eventually did start to roll in, I just had too much work for one person to do. And so I didn't want to leave that business on the table. And that was reason enough for me to want to employ my first employee, which I found really terrifying. And we're sort of 23 full-timers strong now, with lots of freelancers and trend scouts all over the world. So I got over that fear at some point, but that was the point when I realized it's a choice, isn't it, between, do I want to stay as one individual person, or am I turning this into a business? There's a real fork in the road at that point where you have to decide what it is that you're up for.
Yes.
so that was the decision at that point to kind of build. But I didn't really think it would ever get beyond maybe 2 or 3 or 5 people. And the more that you grow, the more that you hit some of those milestones, once you hit 5, you think, well, probably we could get big enough to get to 10. And actually now I can kind of see what a 15-person agency might look like. And you start to surround yourself with people who are that little step ahead of you, so that you can prove to yourself it's tangible. You can see other people are doing it, so there's no real reason why you can't.
No, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, you've done phenomenal, and you are an absolute inspirational and role model. Looking back now, so from where you started to where you are, you always hear this because of the Simon Sinek thing about what is your why? But, what does drive you now? So looking at where you are now, what you've achieved so much. There's another phase coming. What is it that's driving you to the next phase?
Well, my 50th birthday, which is in 3 years, is, I think, age can be something really useful. Actually, it can be a useful marker to kind of ask yourself whether you're doing everything you want to do in life. Not necessarily whether you've achieved everything you want to achieve in your career, but what did you want to do? Are you doing the things that you set out to do? And I'm pretty, as you can imagine, as a trend forecaster, I'm always thinking about the future anyway. So of course I'm planning my life all the time and thinking about, I had a 10-year plan in which I said I want to write a book, and I want to develop a different stance as a thought leader rather than a trend forecasting practitioner going into businesses and delivering trend forecasting, which I haven't been doing that for quite a lot of years now. My team do that. I've trained them to do that, but I run the business. I'm a managing director. So my sort of role as a trend forecaster has really changed, but I have a lot of knowledge that I would like to get down. I just want to get it down. I want to share it. And even though I work with, $100 billion brands are typically what we work with globally. And some of them, well, all of them do amazing things. They use trends in incredible ways, and we help them do that. But no one company does everything right. And so I felt that I needed to I wanted to really share the best practice that I'm seeing across the board in all of these $100 billion brands. So that's kind of shaping where I'm headed in terms of what I want to do at TrendBible and how I want to spend my time. So I'm writing a book about that and starting to capture things like models that I've created over the years where, I might scribble it down on a piece of paper to show some of my team how to think through something. But actually, I've realized that those are really valuable, trademarkable, registrable tools that I've invented because I've been working with these really high profile, huge brands over the years. So it's a really nice way to kind of still be a trend forecaster, but not be actively delivering work to clients. So I think that, and all of that's come about from my 50th birthday, sort of being in sight now and thinking about, well, am I done as a trend forecaster? Is my technical profession finished and I'm just running a business now? That's where those thoughts came from, was to shape up this sort of, like you said, a next phase.
Yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it, about like looking at through the decades of how our lives change and how our motivations change and how, as I say, how our whys change all the way through the decades. And I do think that 50, I'm 51, 52 this year, and I do think that is quite a pivotal moment because, it's a bit of a wake-up call, because even still in your 40s, you're still pretty young and you still think you've got to, because you have. I mean, I don't know if you ever listened to Gary Vee, but he did a fantastic video out there the other day all about age. And it was about, I can't remember what age he was using, but let's say it was 50. And he was saying, you could live another 50 years. You might live because of the way that we are living now, through better healthcare, through better nutrition, being more aware of our well-being, that it's very possible that in midlife you could live that life again.
Yes.
So how important it is to shape that future using the lessons that you've learned, and I do think that people are really getting to that midlife point now and thinking, right, okay, I need to sort this out. I need to be sure, and if they aren't, they should be. because I think it's vitally important it's amazing how many female founders, I'm sort of jumping from a tangent here, but how many female founders I meet and how many CEOs I meet. And I say to them, so what's your exit strategy? What's the plan? What are you going to do? Are you on track? Are you going to, is your exit going to fund you through your retirement? Is your business making enough to sell it? Are you going to, are you looking to sell it? Are you looking to put somebody in? And if you're looking to put somebody in and still be there on the board, who's going to be your number two? Are you prepping them? Have you got a number two in your sights? And they sit there, and actually many of them are so busy in the doing, what I was talking about before, about the juggle and the being the someones and forgetting there is someone, that they haven't actually considered what's going to happen. And if you look at it, if you think, well, okay, I want to retire at 55 or I want to retire at 60 and you're 50 now, you've seen how fast those years you've been in business have gone by. It's so important. So anybody listening, I want you to really take this on board, that those latter years seem to go so quick. This is the time now to be focusing on that strategy for growth and that exit, or and shaping up and designing that future, because time just goes so fast.
I think you're so right. There's a book that I read called The 100-Year Life, and it's exactly the same as what you mentioned with the Gary V feature. Let's hope that, given the things that can come along in life and knock you off course, but if you make that assumption that we technically know enough about what it takes to live a 100-year life. We know the parts of the world, those sort of blue zones where people have certain diets and certain cultures and certain lifestyles and ways of living and ways of handling stress that allow them to live a long and healthy life. And we know about exercise and diet that should allow us to do that. But I think we haven't quite caught up with the idea that, like you've said, if that means living another 50 years, how much of that is going to be in good quality health? What does it mean when you take the elements of your of what you love about your job out of a paid career? Like, what can you do with the bits that you loved if you're not in a business? And I think that can be some of the difficult stuff to answer for founders, is if this isn't business focused, what have I got? What have I actually got here that I love to do? So
there could be many other women, next generation even, who are sort of sitting there thinking, God, I just feel so stuck, but I want a bit of this, I want to change my life. I want to make those latter years count. If you were paying forward some advice to anyone who is sat at a crossroads and feeling stuck, what would you suggest that they should do to turn their life around?
Well, I think it can be you can allow that to become this enormous question, can't you? Like, what am I going to do? I don't know where to go. You can, because of the enormity of it and the pressure to pick a good option, I think my advice would always be just look for a tiny glimmer. Look for the smallest thing, look for something that you really love. Get into the granular detail of why you love that thing and just start really small. Like, take the pressure away by building from something teeny tiny. One of the best bits of business advice I was ever given was to go as narrow as you dare. And that's why I ended up running a trend forecasting agency in the world of home interiors when everyone else runs trend forecasting agencies that focus on fashion. Because the bit that I loved and the tiniest thing I could think of was decor and home. And it was frightening to go that narrow because I could tell that nobody else had. But actually it's ended up being completely our jewel in the crown. And it's given us so much differentiation in a busy marketplace that we just stand for one thing and we only focus on one thing. So the other thing that's linked to that I always say to people is, when you're starting out on any new direction in life, whether it's business or whether it's personal, you're starting to sort of build your raft and you've just got to have that first log. That's all you need. You don't need all of the tools and equipment laid out. You don't need to be in your best brain space with your shiny new notebook ready to go. That's for another day. That'll come when you've actually got it all together and you figured it out. But you just need the nugget. You just need the little bit where you go, I know I love that. I know that means something to me. And I'm going to dig into that. I'm going to find out why it means something to me. And I'm going to build from that tiny nugget a narrative, a story, some goals, some ambitions, some thoughts. I'm going to build a network around that. I'm going to find other people who love it. So that would be my advice, because I think it can be, generally when you're in that position where you're at a crossroads, a lot's happened and it's an overwhelming place to be. So you need to take it right back to just the teeniest, tiniest fragment, and have faith in that, really believe in your passion for that thing, and it will allow, you'll pull the thread of it, and it'll take you on a journey it'll take you on a journey where the journey that it thinks you need to go on. And that's sometimes better than trying to force things to happen when you're at a crossroads, because it can be a difficult time to make decisions when you're not sure of where you want to go or what you want to do.
No, it can be very difficult. And I think the thing is, sometimes you're so forced on feeling stuck and looking for what you do want that you just can't get that clarity. And sometimes it's a lot easier to think about what you don't like and strip out all the things that aren't serving you, all the things that are draining on your energy. And by being really raw and honest about it and getting it down on paper, and then when you've got that space from getting rid of all the things you don't like, it's to feel. And you can feel the energy shift when you talk about something you're passionate about. You talk about your trend forecasting, or you talk about your kids or your family. We're passionate, it's passion, isn't it? And that energy lifts, and that energy, gets across to other people, and then they feel that energy. So if you're not living your purpose, if you're not living your passion, and you don't truly believe in it, well, how's anybody else? So I think to find your own way, it's about being honest and raw, isn't it? About,
people in my industry couldn't even see why I was making the choices that I was making. And they were people who really understood the trend forecasting industry, and they didn't know why I would move to Newcastle or why I would try and set up on my own. So there are always going to be people who just don't get it. And usually those people actually have your best interests at heart. They're usually trying to keep you safe. They're usually trying to get you to do something that feels safe for them. But actually you can take on board and you can listen to their advice. But I think it's really important to just recognise that that might be coming from somewhere that's really different to where your head is at. You might want to be doing something that is different and that nobody understands yet, but it'll become clear to them in time, or not, as the case may be. There are so many of my close friends that have got no clue what it is I do for a living. They just don't understand it. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't impede our friendship or our ability to have good quality conversations and time together at all. So people understanding what you want to do isn't the be all and end all.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I don't even think my mum and dad know what I do. Not now. I think when I had just the wedding and event business and I was just doing that, it was easy because it was visual. They could see me styling weddings, designing weddings. So it was like, oh yeah, my daughter does that. But what actually is she doing with her mentoring and her coaching and her book writing and the bloody podcasting? I just think they think I come in here and sit in here and share the office with the dogs for the day. I really do. I don't think they've got a bloody clue. I think if someone asked them what she did, I think they'd go, I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It's like what you say. It just doesn't matter. As long as it sets your heart on fire, your soul on fire, you're living your purpose, you're not wasting time. It doesn't matter what other people think, does it? As long as it's delivering it for you. So, as I knew I would, I've thoroughly enjoyed, as I do all the time we spend together, our chat. Thank you. Oh, thank you for giving your time to me and to my listeners on Formidable Over 40. Can you share with us where our listeners can find out more about you? Where can they go to find out more about TrendBible?
Yes, well, if they're interested in trend forecasting, the best place to head is our website, which is trendbible.com. And I have my own personal blog on there as well. So I write about topics of the day that are of interest and help people understand what the future of that topic might be. So if anyone's interested in what the trends actually are, that's a good place to go. And we've got a level of we've got a subscription platform. We've got something that we call the basics level, where actually you can subscribe for free and get some trend information on there if you want to try out and have a look at some trend information. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to connect with me on there and ask any questions, more than happy. And I've also got on Instagram, it's just an Instagram community really, and it's really in its early stages, but I have a handle there which is called the Female Scale Up, where I just talk about all the joys and tribulations of being a female founder and scaling a business from startup to scale up. So it's a really nice place just to sort of share the raw realities of the things that we've talked about today, really. And it's a nice community of people from florists to illustrators and, people that run all sorts of different businesses who have really good conversations on there. So that's the Female Scale Up, which is another good place to connect.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, thank you for listening to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. Thank you so much to the brilliant Jo for joining us and sharing her insights. Head to the show notes to find links to connect with Jo and find out more about her wonderful work. Follow the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes, and please do share Formidable Over 40 with anyone you think will enjoy it or needs it. Please do rate and subscribe. Thank you.